I'm Maren, and I was 26 the night my brother stood in front of 200 investors and called me the deaf kid we keep in the back room. He didn't know my hearing aid picked up the whole thing through the wireless mic he'd lent me an hour earlier. He didn't know I was already in the parking garage of the Seaport Hotel in Boston, sitting in my car, listening to every word he said about me before he walked on stage. He said it like a joke. He said it the way you talk about a stained couch you couldn't get rid of. The worst part wasn't even what he said. It was the laugh. That short, knowing chuckle from the people standing around him. 2 of his college buddies, a woman from his PR firm, and someone else whose voice I didn't recognize. They laughed like they'd heard it before, like it was a recurring bit. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel and the engine off, the parking lights blinking yellow on the concrete pillar in front of me, and I realized something I should have realized years ago. They hadn't accidentally left me out of things. They had built a whole life around making sure I never got in. Why does it take being mocked into a hot mic for someone to finally hear the truth they already knew? My older brother's name is Holden. He's 31. 2 months before that night, he'd asked me to help him build the brand for his new company. A fintech startup he'd been talking about since grad school. He said it casually, over Sunday dinner at our mother's house in Newton, the way he used to ask me to help him with science fair posters when I was 9 and he was 14. "Ma, you've got the eye," he said, smiling around a mouthful of pot roast. "Just sketch a few things. It would mean a lot if it came from family. It would mean a lot if it came from family." I should have recorded that one too. I'd been freelancing as a brand designer for almost 4 years by then. I had 2 pretty good clients in the Cambridge tech corridor and a portfolio I was building toward an MFA application at RISD. I lived in a 1-bedroom in Austin that ate up most of what I made. The rent in Boston has gotten ridiculous, especially after the move-in fees and broker fees and that little surcharge landlords now invent just because they can. So when Holden said he could pay me, I said yes before he finished the sentence. He never paid me. Not the deposit he promised. Not the milestone check. Not the percentage we shook on at our mother's kitchen table while she watched and said, "See, this is what family does." What family does? I keep coming back to that phrase. I am hard of hearing, not deaf. Capital D. I grew up oral, with hearing aids since I was 3, and I read lips fluently in English and well enough in Spanish to get by. I sound, to most people, like a slightly tired woman with a faintly flat A. Strangers don't always notice. Family forgets. Holden forgot constantly and then remembered exactly when it embarrassed him. The first hint of trouble came about 3 weeks into the project. He'd been forwarding my mock-ups to someone he kept calling our creative consultant. I asked who that was. He laughed and said, "Just a guy I went to B school with. He's reviewing things to make sure we're investor ready." Reviewing things. My logos. My type system. My colour palette pulled from a photograph I took in the public garden the previous October. Reviewing. A week later, the consultant had a name. Dax Whitfield. Holden mentioned him at dinner, like he'd been there from the start. Mom said, "Oh, how nice that Holden has a friend helping out." She said it the way she used to say, "How nice that Holden made the lacrosse team," when I was 9 and had just gotten my first set of behind-the-ear aids and she still had no idea how to tell people about them. I should have watched then. I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself it was just a name. I told myself my brother wouldn't take my work. I am, looking back, an embarrassment of optimism. The launch event was set for a Thursday evening in early May at one of those hotel ballrooms in the Seaport with the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the harbour. 200 guests, investors, a few local press. The mayor's office sent someone. Holden had been talking about it for weeks like it was his coronation. 3 days before the launch, I got an email from his assistant, not from him, letting me know that due to space constraints and the audio-forward nature of the programme, it would be best if I attended virtually from the family viewing room on the 2nd floor of the hotel. They had set up a TV with captioning. They had ordered me a chicken plate. They had even thought, the email said, of your comfort. I read that email 4 times in my kitchen while my coffee went cold. Then I forwarded it to my Aunt Maeve. Aunt Maeve is my father's older sister. She is 62, divorced twice, and runs a small advocacy non-profit in Somerville. for people with hearing loss and other sensory disabilities. She lost her hearing in her right ear at 40 after a viral infection, and she has, since then, become the family member I trust more than anyone alive. She is the only person who learned ASL with me when I went through a stretch in my early 20s wanting to know it. My mother said it was a phase. My brother said it would make people uncomfortable. Aunt Maeve drove out to my apartment every Tuesday for a year and signed with me over takeout from the Vietnamese place on Brighton Ave. She read the email and called me within 4 minutes. "Honey," she said in that low, careful voice she uses when she's already 3 moves ahead of you, "what does your contract say about credit?" I told her there wasn't a contract, just a Venmo memo and a handshake. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Okay, don't do anything yet. Save everything, every email, every message, every file you sent him with a timestamp on it. Don't delete a single thing. And Maren, start watching." So I started watching. That weekend, my cousin Theo came over. Theo is 29 and works in IT for a hospital system downtown. He's quiet, twitchy in a likeable way, and has been my best friend since we were both 10 and figured out that our families treated us like the weird ones in our respective households. He brought beer. He sat on my couch and listened while I told him everything. When I finished, he said, "Ma, do you still have access to this shared drive?" I did. Holden had never amused me. He just stopped commenting. We sat on my floor with 2 laptops open and went through every folder, every file, every version history, and what we found was that someone, Dax Whitfield, presumably, though the account was a generic Gmail address, had been opening my source files, exporting them, and re-uploading them under his own naming convention. The pixel-for-pixel logo, the type system, even the photograph from the public garden, cropped and recoloured. Theo made copies of all the version histories. He took screenshots of the access logs. He saved everything to a private drive he set up on a server his hospital didn't know about. He looked at me and said, "What do you want to do?" I didn't know yet. I just knew I wasn't going to sit in a viewing room with a chicken plate. The week of the launch, my mother called me 3 times. Each call was a slightly different sales pitch for why I should be supportive and show up the way Holden needs me to, and not make this about you. "Mum," I finally said on the 3rd call, "I designed his company." "Honey," she said, and I could hear her opening the dishwasher in the background. "You helped." That's different from designing. There it was. The thing I'd been afraid she'd say my whole life. I sat down on the edge of my bed and looked at the wall. There was a framed print there. My grandmother Edith had given me when I was 12, right after she'd taken me to my first art exhibit at the MFA. It was a small reproduction of a Mary Cassatt. A woman reading a letter. Grandma Edith had written on the back, in her tight schoolteacher cursive, from Maren. "Read your own story carefully." I read it again that night. And I started planning. 2 days before the launch, my father came by. This part I didn't expect. My father, Wallace, is 70. He retired 3 years ago from teaching high school history in Brookline. He's a man who has spent most of his adult life letting my mother run the emotional weather of the house because it was easier than fighting her, and I had long ago stopped expecting him to take my side on anything. But he showed up at my apartment that afternoon with a brown paper bag containing 2 coffees from the place on the corner and a manila folder. He sat down at my kitchen table. He didn't take his coat off. "I want you to know something," he said. He wouldn't quite look at me. "I've known about Dax Whitfield for about 3 weeks. Holden told me at the club." He didn't think I was listening, but I was. He slid the folder across the table. Inside were printouts, screenshots, Holden's group chat with 3 of his business school friends, the kind of messages people send when they think no one will ever read them. Comments about me. Comments about Aunt Maeve. Comments about a deaf consultant Holden had refused to hire for the launch's accessibility setup because he didn't want, and I quote from the screenshot, "to set the tone wrong with money people." I read every one of them. I didn't cry. I felt something hard and clean settle in the middle of my chest. "How did you get these?" I asked. He smiled just a little. Your brother gave me his old phone last Christmas because mine was too slow. He never logged out of anything. I looked at my father. For the first time in maybe 10 years, I looked at him like he was a person instead of a fixture. Why are you giving me this? I asked. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. Because your grandmother asked me, when she was dying, to make sure nobody made you small, and I let her down for 15 years. I'm not letting her down on this one. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. He stood up and put his hand on my shoulder for a second, and then he left. The night of the launch, I drove to the Seaport Hotel an hour early. I parked in the garage. I sat in my car with the engine off. I had the wireless mic Holden had handed me at our mother's house the previous Sunday when he'd asked me to test it for him. A request I now understood was less about testing and more about making sure I felt included enough not to make a scene. I had paired the mic with my hearing aids. He didn't know I could do that. Most people don't know that's a thing modern hearing aids can do. They think of them the way they thought of them in 1992, beige plastic for grandparents. They aren't that anymore. Mine are Bluetooth. Mine can record. Mine had been recording intermittently for 40 minutes, while Holden walked around the green room with the mic clipped to his lapel, joking with his friends. That's how I heard him say it. Yeah, no, the deaf kid we keep in the back room. She'll be fine. Mom set up the family viewing thing. Honestly, it's better. Easier. Laughter. The little chuckle of people who have agreed, without ever quite saying it, that I am less than they are. I sat in my car. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I called Theo. It's time, I said. Theo had spent the previous 48 hours doing something I am not going to fully describe because it involved the back end of Holden's event production company and a vendor login that someone, somewhere, had reused as a password too many times. What I will say is that the main LED screen behind the stage, the one that was supposed to display Holden's company logo during his keynote, was, by the time I walked into the hotel lobby, no longer running on the program the event company had prepped. It was running on ours. Aunt Maeve met me at the lobby entrance. She was wearing the navy blazer she wears to court when she advocates for clients. She didn't hug me. She just nodded once, like a coach before a game. We went up to the second floor. We did not go to the family viewing room. We went instead to the main ballroom where a young woman with a clipboard tried to stop us until Aunt Maeve flashed her press credential. She does occasional op-eds for a local disability blog and had registered as press for the event 2 weeks earlier, which I'd not known until that exact moment. We sat in the back row. I kept my coat on, the lights dimmed. Holden walked on stage. He looked good. He always looks good. He has my mother's smile and my father's height and an easy way of standing on a stage like he was born to it. He started his keynote. He thanked the investors. He thanked his incredible team. He thanked the creative vision of Dax Whitfield, who has been with us from day one. The screen behind him changed. It changed to the version history of every file I had made, side by side. My file, dated and time-stamped and watermarked with my name in the metadata. Dax Whitfield's version, uploaded 40 minutes after I sent mine, identical down to the pixel. My photograph of the public garden, the original RAW file with my camera serial number visible. His creative direction memo, copy-pasted from my email to Holden 3 weeks earlier. It happened slowly. The audience saw it before Holden did. He kept talking for maybe 8 seconds while the room behind him went quiet in a way that felt physical. Then he turned around. I have never seen a person's face do what his face did. He went from confused to angry to something almost childlike, all in the span of maybe 4 seconds. He looked into the wings for the production manager. The production manager was already on her radio. The radio wasn't helping her. Then the screen changed again, to the group chat, to his own words. Highlighted in soft yellow, the deaf kid we keep in the back room. The deaf consultant I'm not going to hire because it sets the wrong tone. The line where he called Aunt Maeve, by name, a professional victim. The room stayed quiet. I could hear, very clearly, somebody's chair creak 2 rows ahead of me. Then Aunt Maeve stood up. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. She turned to the woman in the row in front of her, a woman I later learned was a junior partner at the lead VC firm, and she said, just loud enough to carry, "I think we have everything we need." She walked out. I walked out behind her. In the lobby, I did finally cry. Not a lot, just enough to feel my face get warm. Aunt Maeve put her arm around my shoulders and said, "You did that quietly. That's how you do it. Loud is what they expect." We went home. The next 48 hours were the strangest of my life. My phone did not stop. I didn't answer it. I let Theo screen things. 2 of Holden's investors pulled their term sheets by Friday morning. The lead VC sent a quiet, careful email to Holden's lawyer that essentially asked, in legal language, what exactly they had been told about authorship of the company's IP. Holden's PR firm dropped in by Saturday afternoon. My mother called 9 times. My father once. I answered my father. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. And I was. In a strange, scraped-out way, I was. "Your mother is upset," he said. "I'm not going to ask you to call her." "Thank you," I said. He paused. Then he said, "Your grandmother would be proud of you." I sat on my floor and held the phone to my ear and didn't say anything for a long time. The fallout took the rest of the spring. Holden's company didn't die, but it shrank. He had to bring in real co-founders to fix what he couldn't. The branding he built on my work got pulled. He had to rebrand under a different name, with a different designer, who I hope was paid in full and in writing. He sent me in late May a long apology email that I read once and saved in a folder and did not respond to. Dax Whitfield, it turned out, was a real person, a guy from Holden's B-School class who'd been paid a small flat fee to lend his name to the project. The fact that Holden had been willing to do that he'd been willing to give a stranger credit for my work just to keep his investors from knowing his sister was a freelancer with a hearing aid, was the thing I couldn't quite get past for a while. I filed a copyright claim on the original brand system. I won. The settlement wasn't huge by tech standards, but it was, by my standards, the most money I'd ever held at one time. I used part of it to pay off my undergrad loans. I used part of it to apply, finally, to the MFA program at RISD. I used a small part of it to take Aunt Maeve and Theo out to dinner at a place in the North End we'd been talking about for 2 years. My mother and I are not speaking. I'm not sure if that's permanent. I'm not sure I want it to be permanent, but I know, the way I know my own handwriting, that I'm not going to be the one to call first. There's a thing she'd have to admit before we could have a real conversation again, and she isn't ready, and maybe she never will be. And I have made my peace with that being her choice and not mine. My father comes by on Saturdays. We get coffee. We talk about books mostly. He's reading a history of New England textile mills that he keeps trying to get me interested in. I let him, because watching him be enthusiastic about something is new for me. Aunt Maeve and I had lunch last week. She told me her non-profit got a grant. She told me one of her clients, a 16-year-old kid in Lynn who got cochlear implants last year, had asked for a mentor. She told me she gave the kid my number. I called the kid yesterday. Her name is Sella. She asked me, in the kind of direct way only teenagers can manage, whether I thought it was worth telling people what I needed or whether it was easier to just go without. I thought about my brother. I thought about that mic. I thought about my father's hand on my shoulder in my kitchen. I told her the truth. I told her it is harder in the short run to tell people what you need. I told her it costs you, sometimes, the people who only love the quiet version of you. And then I told her that the people you find on the other side of that, the people who stay, the people who show up with a folder full of receipts and a coffee from the corner, those people are real in a way the others never were. She said, "Okay, thanks, Maren." And then she said very quietly, "I'm glad you exist." I sat with the phone in my hand for a while after she hung up. I keep thinking about that night in the parking garage, the dome light, the yellow blink of the warning bulbs on the concrete pillar, the way my hands felt on the steering wheel before I made the call to Theo. I keep thinking about how close I came to driving home, to going upstairs, to pouring a glass of wine and pretending I hadn't heard what I heard. I didn't drive home. I made the call. And I want to say to anyone watching this, anyone who has ever sat in a parking garage of their own, listening to people they love talk about them like a stained couch. You are allowed to make the call. You are not the problem. You were never the problem. You were never the problem. You are not loud. You are not too much. You are not the thing that needs to be moved to the back room so that everyone else can have their photograph. You are the person who made the photograph possible. You always were. The trick, the only trick I have learned in 26 years on this planet, is that you don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to stop apologizing for the sound of your own voice. If this is the first time anyone has ever told you that, let me be the first. Drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever been the quiet one in your family. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your name. I want to know it. I want to say it out loud. Your name is not that kid. Your name is not the difficult one. Your name is not the one we keep in the back room. Your name is your name. Say it like you mean it. I'm Maren. And I'm not in the back room anymore. I used to think the worst thing my brother ever did was call me the deaf kid we keep in the back room. For a long time after that night in the Seaport Hotel, I'd replay those words in my head while I was doing dishes, while I was waiting at red lights, while I was trying to fall asleep. And then one day, maybe 4 months later, I realized something that changed how I carry the whole story. The worst thing Holden did wasn't what he said into that hot mic. The worst thing was the years before it, when he taught everyone else in the family that talking about me that way was normal. The words in the mic were just the bill coming due. That's the thing nobody tells you about cause and effect inside a family. The damage doesn't happen on the night of the explosion. The damage happens in the slow accumulation of small permissions. Every time my mother said, "Honey, you helped," instead of "Maren designed it." Every time my father stayed quiet at the dinner table when Holden cracked a joke at my expense. Every time I myself smiled and let it go because I was tired and it was Sunday and the pot roast was good. We all built the room Holden eventually shoved me into. He just happened to be the one who said the quiet part out loud. What I learned, sitting in that parking garage with my hands on the steering wheel, is that staying small is not actually kind. It feels kind. It feels kind. It feels like keeping the peace. But it's a loan you take out against your own future, and the interest is brutal. Every year you spend pretending you didn't hear something, didn't see something, didn't see something, didn't deserve something. It's a year you owe back to yourself eventually. And when the bill comes, it comes all at once. So I want to tell you what I actually believe now, after everything. I believe that having a clear conscience is not the same as being quiet. I believe that being smart enough to gather your receipts is not the same as being vengeful. And I believe that the kind of strength that matters is not the kind that shouts. It's the kind that calls Theo at 7:42 on a Thursday night and says, very calmly, "It's time." It's the kind that says yes when Aunt Maeve hands you a press badge. It's the kind that lets your father slide a manila folder across your kitchen table and doesn't make him explain why it took him 15 years. If somebody in your life is teaching the rest of your family that you're small, you do not have to scream to correct the record. You just have to stop helping them write it, save the receipts, find your Theo, find your Aunt Maeve, and when the room finally gets quiet, say your own name out loud. The people who love you will be relieved to finally hear it.